Oh, well. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Stacy, and I'm one of the counselors in the Student Counseling Center. And I just want to welcome you all to Stress Less. It's one of our signature workshops that we do multiple times throughout the semester. But this is one of our first times to do it. Well, it's our first time to do it live through Teams. So welcome. And I'll also have, you might not be able to see my co-host, but he's going to introduce himself as well.
Hello, everyone. This is Alan Knox. I'm a career consultant with the University Career Center. And yes, like Stacy said, we've teamed up before for both of our departments to put on some different seminars. So glad to be back. Thank you.
Okay. So you won't see us for most of the workshop because I'll be sharing my screen and you'll see our presentation. But hopefully you can still hear us, and feel free to just let us know in the comment box if you can't hear us or if you can't see the presentation. But it should be on the screen, and we're going to go ahead and get started. All right. Let me just make it a little bigger. There we go. Okay, so today's workshop is about stress, obviously, as the name would show. And just as a reminder, if you do have questions throughout this workshop, feel free to add them to our the Q&A box, and we will get to them towards the end of our presentation. There is also closed captioning available for this workshop if needed. If you kind of scroll down to the bottom, I think it's the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a little CC icon, and that's how you can get closed captioning. All right, so let's go ahead and start. So we want to start by discussing stress and what stress is. I think stress is a term that we use often, probably even more in 2020, but sometimes we don't know exactly what it means, or we don't know that there are different types of stress. So stress refers to how the brain and body respond to any change or demand. There are multiple types of stress, and some people would be surprised to hear that not all stress is a bad thing. Not all stress is detrimental. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So there is a type of stress called eustress that is a positive form of stress that can have benefits to our health, motivation, performance, and emotional well-being. So eustress usually develops when a change occurs, but we actually feel able to manage that change, or we feel prepared for that change. So some examples would include the first day at a new job, where you do feel prepared for the job and you feel pretty excited about the job. Riding a roller coaster could be a more enjoyable type of stress for some, not me personally, but for some others. And then also learning a new hobby can be a form of eustress. All right. So we also want to talk about distress, which is usually what we are referring to when we talk about stress. So this is a more unpleasant, generally, experience of stress. And this typically develops when a change occurs, but we feel unable to respond effectively, or we feel unprepared for the stress. So some examples of this, I'll share a couple, and then Alan, feel free to share maybe like a career-related example. But a few would be like the ending of a relationship, or starting a new class and feeling overwhelmed, or even meeting a new person for the first time and feeling pretty overwhelmed by that. Alan, any other examples related to careers?
Yeah, so potentially it could be a few things. I think even like you spoke about stress being positive or negative, graduation is, it's a stressor. Just graduating, you're happy to do it, but it's stressful. Distress, maybe the point where you're trying to, get into an internship, which you need for graduation. And of course, it's a difficult time to do that. So that could fall under that category.
Yes, that's a good example. Okay, so we also want to talk about different types of stress in terms of like how long the stress lasts and how intense it can feel. So acute stress is a very common form, And it comes from demands and pressures of the recent past and from anticipated demands in the near future. So acute stress in small forms or small amounts can be more motivating and almost like inspiring, but too much can become draining and exhausting. So because acute stress is more short term, it doesn't typically cause long-term damage because typically once the stressor has passed, like for example, you see a job interview as an example. So typically once the interview is over, you would then feel some relief. But other examples would be like getting a speeding ticket, having a class presentation, preparing for an upcoming exam. So that's acute stress. Now, chronic stress is what can definitely be more concerning over time because chronic stress is a long-lasting buildup of stress that wears us down over time. So some examples could be, I'll have to put this one at the top because I think it's one of the most relevant, to us right now. So the experiences related to COVID-19 and to, all of the different changes that we have experienced since March. It's been, believe it or not, since March. So that is a long time. And so I would definitely put that in the chronic stress category. But other examples include stress of poverty, stress of growing up in a dysfunctional family, past or current traumas, and experiences of racism and oppression. Chronic stress can feel familiar and comfortable over time because sometimes we feel so used to it, it becomes like our normal. It kind of becomes what we just expect. But that does not mean that it is in any way, healthy for us or in any way beneficial. It still can have very negative impacts because of the long-term damage it can cause. All right, so now we want to talk about what we call stressors. So stressors are some of the situations or events that can really kind of trigger stress for us at times and can be like the catalyst for stress at times. So I have some, actually, let me double check real fast. Yeah, so I have some that are more kind of overall specific, and then Alan will talk about some career specific examples. So transitions are definitely common stressors. It could be moving, it could be starting a new semester, it could be, starting online classes this semester, finances, any conflict, like a change in a friend dynamic or a family dynamic, getting new roommates for the first time. It could be a new class, any family changes, so a marriage, a death, a divorce, a birth. Those are all, remember, stress is really about changes. So those are all changes to kind of what we are used to maybe in our families. Excuse me, it could be hearing about a tragic event. So even if you are not a part of it directly, watching the news, being on social media and hearing about violence, natural disasters, pandemics, all of that can be, those can be stressors. Losing a job or internship or starting a new one, experiencing or witnessing abuse, racism, oppression, and microaggressions are all stressors for sure. Sleep deprivation, chronic illness, sudden changes to a routine, and adjusting. Oh, I said this one before, but definitely I think a really common one I've heard a lot lately from students is adjusting to online classes. So that's definitely a change and potentially a stressor. So this list is not extensive, but these are some that we hear often from students and that are pretty common. So now I'm going to have Alan share some more specific to career.
Yeah, so specific to career, we kind of touched on them in terms of internship, searching and job searching. But career also, you could have finally landed the job that you want. And after 6 months, you get a new manager, a new boss. Well, that can change the whole dynamic. So your career might be shifting and you have to decide, do I dislike this new manager or the whole career in general? A lot of times students are at a crossroads where they're trying to figure out, which way do I go? Do I go maybe a more logical route of making a lot of money, or do I go the direction that I have passion for that really doesn't pay much, but I really enjoy it? So stressors related to, your major is a big one.
Mhm. Okay, I'm hoping that the Prezi is showing for everyone, but please let us know in the Q&A if the Prezi isn't showing. I'm going to just minimize it a little bit so that hopefully everyone can see it. All right, so we'll move on. There we go. Okay, so we talked about stressors, but now we also want to talk about symptoms. So this is more like how you might experience stress, how it could affect you in your body, in your emotional state and your feelings, and then also in your thoughts. And so we'll start with the physical symptoms, because a lot of times the physical symptoms of stress are like what we notice first, because it's hard to ignore when some of these things are happening physically. So some examples of physical symptoms are your heart pounding, cold or clammy palms, feeling dizzy or weak, feeling very fatigued, any interrupted sleep. So it could be trouble falling asleep, or it could be trouble staying asleep, so waking up frequently. Any like stomach issues or like abdominal distress, feeling nauseous, headaches, or hyperventilation, or any kind of shortness of breath. So those are some of the physical symptoms, and I encourage you, either right now or maybe later on in the day, to just take kind of an inventory for yourself of, have I been feeling any of these symptoms? Have I noticed any changes in my body recently? And could that be related to stress? So some emotional or or like feelings-based symptoms could include feeling overwhelmed, feeling depressed, feeling a burnout, so like you're kind of running out of steam to complete the tasks and responsibilities that you have. Feeling anxious, maybe your thoughts are racing a lot, which we'll talk about thoughts in a minute. But just feeling like restless overall. Perceived inability to function, so really feeling like I'm not prepared for this, I'm not equipped for this situation. Really wanting to withdraw from others, so maybe ignoring phone calls, feeling like you really want to be alone more often, things like that. And then also feeling irritated, either more easily than you're used to, or like more often than you're used to. So those are some of the emotional symptoms. And just like with the physical, I would encourage you to kind of think for yourself. Have I been noticing any of these? And how often have I noticed these recently? Excuse me. And then finally, the cognitive symptoms. So these are like thoughts that you've been having, or anything going on more with your thought process. So it could be issues with concentrating, feeling really distracted or forgetful, freezing up often, so kind of even forgetting what you want to say, or kind of losing your train of thought often. It could be difficulty speaking as clearly as you're used to. It could be a lot of like compulsive thoughts, or you're having like a lot of urges to do certain things. Or it could be overall worrying more than you are used to. So those are, again, it's not the full list, but some pretty common symptoms when it comes to stress.
Stacy, before we progress, there's a comment in the chat box that they can see you and hear you, but not see the presentation.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I can see the presentation. I don't know if Billha can click on the presentation on her side and launch that.
Yeah, maybe let me try unsharing my screen and then sharing it again.
That might be working right there, because now I see a red box around the presentation. So if someone could put in the chat, can you see that? Can you see the presentation, please? I'm not seeing anything in the chat. But
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing we could try, because it worked pretty seamlessly on your end, so maybe I'll stop sharing my screen, and do you mind sharing the presentation?
yeah, let me pull that up.
All right, so I'm going to not share mine. Let's see. And then I think Bill Hod, that means you might have to, take me off of live and put Alan on the live, if that makes sense. And while we're waiting, I see a question about, can stress cause dry mouth and nose? And it definitely can. Stress can definitely affect, even like how hydrated you feel, or just how some of those symptoms. So for example, you might have like a presentation you're doing sometimes, and you might notice your mouth is all of a sudden super dry. And that is a common symptom. Oh, some people said they could see it now.
Now they can see it. Yeah.
But then I took it off of mine. So let's see here.
I'm just showing it now on my screen. Should I maybe take that off? And go back to the way you were sharing it?
Let's see.
I
think we could try that. Okay, we'll try one more time and just let us know. Sorry for the tech issues, but let's see. So, Bill Hot, am I still live?
Put you back? Okay, then hold on.
Teams can also be a source of stress sometimes, so we're doing the best we can.
Presentations can be stressful.
Yeah.
Okay, share your screen, Stacy.
Okay, let's see. Okay, here it is. And I see the red box, so I hope.
Maybe
but I'll wait.
Maybe up. Hold on. Maybe I'll send this one live. Give me a second. Okay.
All right. If anyone can let us know for hopefully the last time if you see the presentation.
I don't think I can see updates in the chat, but I do see the red box around the presentation, so I suspect it's working.
Okay.
Me too.
Bill, do you see any comments?
No, no comments yet.
Okay. We'll keep going, but just let us know if you can't see the PowerPoint or the Prezi. Okay, so we talked about some common symptoms for stress. So now we're going to talk about ways that we cope. And it's important to know that sometimes we cope in more healthy and helpful ways, and then other times we cope in not as healthy ways. So we're going to start with those unhealthy coping strategies. So a lot of times when we're feeling stressed, we deny the stress or we try to ignore it. So we really just, we can kind of sense that something's off, but we just push it to the side and we try to just kind of power through, which is usually not helpful because the stress often doesn't just go away without acknowledging it. Sometimes, but not often. So that kind of goes along with avoidance. We might avoid certain situations that we know could be stressful. Sometimes we overextend ourselves. So we feel like the harder we work, we can kind of get rid of any stress. But that can lead to really, again, burnout, which we talked about at the beginning. And can lead to some health issues too, when we just are kind of go, go, go without any pauses. Sometimes we self-medicate when we're stressed. So, especially when you're feeling those like physical and emotional symptoms, sometimes we just want those to stop. And so we do, we might use alcohol or other substances to kind of, numb ourselves from that, which is not the healthiest way to cope. And same goes for, sometimes we either stop eating because we feel like we don't have, time or energy, or sometimes we do use food as a way to cope. Sleeping, sometimes, again, when we're wanting to like overextend our energy, we might say, I don't have time for sleep. I'm just going to have to pull some all-nighters. And so we just, ignore sleep. And then sometimes, because we're trying to kind of avoid again, or we just feel so overwhelmed, we might oversleep. So we might, sleep through certain classes or through certain events that we were supposed to attend, things like that. Isolating from others. Sometimes when we're stressed, we really don't want any distractions, and we really feel too overwhelmed to maybe interact with others. So we, kind of withdraw. We start ignoring people's phone calls or text messages, or, canceling on appointments and events, things like that. And then a huge one is procrastinating. I think we've probably all done some procrastinating, but sometimes the stress, it just leads to so many symptoms and so much distress that we kind of put something off to the side. Let's say you're stressed about an exam, and you just decide, oh, I'll study for it later, and you just keep saying later, 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 and then it's test day, and you haven't actually studied. So procrastination is really a form of avoidance that we use that is not as helpful as we sometimes think it will be. So, okay, click here. Okay, so since those are some strategies we don't really want to use, or we would not encourage using as frequently, we do want to talk about healthy coping strategies. So the first would be, instead of being in denial, would be to really recognize stress and recognize your signs of stress. So that's why we spent so much time at the beginning talking about, certain symptoms, certain stressors and triggers, because it is important to know for you, how do I know that I'm stressed? What do I feel like when I'm stressed? What happens in my body when I'm stressed? So that's the first step, is to recognize some of the signs, and then also your stressors. So, if you're aware of your stressors, like, for example, if you know that job interviews tend to, lead to like the dry mouth that we talked about, or lead to maybe a lot of distress, then you can prepare for that kind of stress. So that goes into point 3, is that some stress is not, random, or it's not a surprise. Like, oh, I have an interview on this day, or, I have an exam on this day, or I have a first date on this day, whatever it could be. So that kind of stress, you can try to prepare for. You can take some steps to, really practice for the interview. You can, kind of do certain activities that we'll get to in a minute that help to kind of soothe your body and kind of quiet some of the racing thoughts that you have as well. So yeah, it's definitely helpful if you can predict and prepare some of the stress, and then make changes as needed. Of course, that's not possible all the time, but when it is, I definitely recommend preparing as much as possible. You can also alter your perceptions of the stressor. So, sometimes with stress, we have a lot of these thoughts that can kind of perpetuate the stress. So let's say it is like a job interview, and you're already noticing these thoughts of, oh man, I'm not, qualified for this job, or they probably want someone with 2 years more experience than I have, or, whatever those like doubtful thoughts might be. If you can kind of notice when you're having those thoughts and pause and, really alter your perception and say, hey, this is a great opportunity. Whatever happens, this is great practice for the future. And, them inviting me to this interview must mean that they see something in me. So I'm going to, take this as a confidence boost. So sometimes just altering our perceptions and what kind of messages we're saying to ourselves, that can definitely be a helpful coping strategy. And it's easier said than done. So it takes practice, but it can be very effective. Okay, managing stress by organizing your time and environment. So definitely, if you feel stressed often because of, not having enough time to do certain things, or feeling like, there aren't enough hours in the day, then really taking the time to use a planner or, your calendar and your phone, and kind of plan out, I'm going to do this from 1 to 3, I'm going to do this from 5 to 7. Sometimes that can help to reduce some of the stress. Okay, next would be avoiding unnecessary stress. So, there are some times where stress, isn't necessary, I guess you could say. Like, there are times when we kind of add more stress to our plate than needed. So that could be saying yes to 5, invitations to be an officer in a group, for example. It could be saying yes to volunteering in 5 different places, which, volunteering is great, but if you reduced it to maybe 3, you could reduce some of the stress just by default. So it is sometimes about setting like limits for ourselves, being kind of realistic with our time and our energy levels and things like that. Let's see, next, this kind of goes along with that, but setting appropriate boundaries. So setting boundaries for ourselves, but then also setting boundaries with others. So letting people know, I wish I could be a part of this group or be an officer, but it's just not doable with my schedule. And, I hope you can respect that, and I hope you won't be offended, but this is just what I need to do for my own health, really. So that's an example of setting a boundary. Also asking for help. So sometimes maybe, you did get a little bit in over your head, and that's okay because we're all human, but maybe asking if someone can, help out, take the lead on a project, or, asking a roommate, can you do the dishes tonight? But I promise I'll do them next week. It's just a busy week or something like that. Another healthy coping strategy would be creating time for fun and for relaxation and to take care of yourself. So whether that is scheduling in certain times throughout the week when you will, do something you enjoy, like cook a meal, go to a restaurant, which I know is harder now, do, a Zoom call with a friend, but just really being intentional about like scheduling those activities so that as no matter how busy you get, you have this time when you will get to relax. But it can also be briefer than, like a hour-long Zoom. It can be like, I'm going to study for 2 hours, but every 30 minutes, I'll take a quick 5-minute walk around my dorm just to get, a change of pace and just to kind of let loose for a little bit. So those are some examples of creating time for fun and self-care. And then finally, it is helpful to remember that acute stress is temporary, as we've talked about. So reminding yourself it will pass. So if it is something that's very specific to like a test or an interview or a networking event, to kind of even just, I like to imagine, in 30, or we'll say in an hour, this will be done. I'll be back, home watching my Netflix. So no matter what happens in this hour, it's an hour, and then I can go on to the next part of my life. So that's a tip I use often. So let us know if you have any questions in the Q&A box about healthy coping, or if you've had any other coping strategies that work really well for you. We would love to hear those too. All right. Okay, next we want to talk about strategies. So we talked about healthy coping, but it's helpful to really think what does that look like? Like, how would I specifically implement some of those healthy coping skills? And so I shared a little bit with the boundaries and things like that, but here are some other really specific strategies that can help with stress. First would be to take a deep breath, or maybe a few deep breaths, because a lot of times when we're stressed, we're also kind of on the go. We're not really pausing to think clearly. We're feeling overwhelmed. And so just pausing and taking a deep breath in through your nose and then out through your mouth, just doing that for maybe a minute, even that can just kind of help to reduce some of the stress. Practicing mindfulness is another helpful strategy. So mindfulness is a practice of really focusing on the present moment and being really aware of what's happening for you in your body or even around you in a present moment. So for example, it could be just closing your eyes and noticing how your body feels. It could be noticing, your breathing, just kind of almost listening to your breathing. But it's really just focusing on what's going on right in that moment. And that can be really helpful with stress. Because a lot of times stress is like focusing on what's to come in the future. And so that's why focusing on the present moment can be helpful. We talked about scheduling time for pleasurable activities, but just to be clear, I really mean like scheduling it in. So if you have to, put it on your in your planner or calendar, but I think when it's actually on your schedule, it's more likely that you'll do it and you won't just skip it because you're stressed. So to really try to make it be intentional about that. Okay, so also journaling your emotions or your feelings of gratitude or even positive statements like, encouragement, almost like pep talks to yourself. That can always be pretty helpful with stress as well. We talked about prioritizing your responsibilities, but that could also look like just making a list of, okay, I have these 5 things I need to do, but which one do I want to do first or do I need to do first based on when it's due or things like that. Setting intentional goals, which we'll talk about in a few slides, so I'll skip on that for now. We talked about managing time, but again, it kind of goes back to breaking down like how much free time do I really have? How much time am I out of my classes, for example? And then how much time do I want to designate to each responsibility? So really just setting up a clear schedule for that can be helpful. Next would be talk about your stress rather than avoiding it. So I've already kind of explained that avoiding it does not make it go away. It might, make it go away like temporarily, but it's still there. I promise it's still there, and it's just kind of building up. So talking about it with a friend, family member, journaling about it, talking with a counselor about it, those kinds of things help to really get it out. So it's not like something you're just holding on to alone. So. We definitely talked about self-care, so I'll pass that for now, but just one note about self-care. It's not only doing like fun activities, but it's also taking care of basic needs. So like sleeping, getting nutrition, showering, brushing your teeth, all those things that, it seems like, for some, it seems like a given that we should do those. But when we're stressed, believe me, there have been times when I'm stressed and I'm like, do I really need to brush my teeth right now, or can I just do it later? Which sounds funny, but I think giving yourself that time is really important to just take care of your basic needs. All right. Okay, so we'll get to this. I think we have time for these. So limiting social media is really important. I know right now we're all kind of on our screens more often, and so it's easier to just pop onto social media. But social media, even though it has some benefits, it can also contribute to stress when you just, it's like you're seeing all these things other people are doing, you're seeing all these events. It's just a lot coming at you at once. So limiting social media exposure can also be helpful. Sleep is very, very important. Getting, consistent sleep really helps some of the symptoms of stress to be less like intense, or sometimes to even last a shorter amount of time. So sleep is just like the foundation for well-being overall, honestly. Sleep should have been at the top of this list, probably. And then, spending time with people you care about or animals that you care about can also help with stress. And then I skipped one that's called progressive muscle relaxation. So if you do notice a lot of like tension when you're stressed, like in your muscles, then doing a practice, and you can Google like the whole script on how to do this, but it's basically tensing one muscle at a time and releasing that muscle, and then moving on to the next. So you would start like in your head, basically like with kind of like, what's the word, like furrowing your eyebrows and making them really tense, and then releasing them. And you would go all through your body like that. And for some people, that's helpful just to kind of really address the tension that you're feeling and help to release some of it. All right, so that's a lot of strategies. I would recommend just writing down, like 2 or 3 of these that maybe you've never tried that you want to try, because it's all about finding which ones work best for you. And Alan's going to talk some more about some career and internship specific strategies, if I can get there. Okay.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Stacy. So kind of like we spoke about, sometimes we get stressed and we put things off and it makes it worse than what it is. And I've met with many students where they say, well, if I'd have, it's kind of a load off my mind to come in. I wish I'd have come in sooner because I feel a little bit better. So essentially, visit the Career Center, earlier the better. And there's not really any pressure with it. It's a free service. So it doesn't matter if we meet for 5 minutes or half an hour. It's really whatever it is that you need. Creating a LinkedIn account and updating it regularly, also something that we can help you with. And it's kind of I'm not saying it's a huge task, but it's not something that you do overnight. So you can keep updating it and adding to it. It's kind of like the turtle that wins the race. You just kind of keep working at it and you gradually chip away at it, and it gets better and better over time. Creating a resume, updating that regularly, having people review it, which is what we do. Attending any of our workshops or career fairs or any of our events. I'm a huge fan of any continuing education. If you attend an hour-long education and you walk away with some little tidbit of something, I think it's worth it. So attending as many things as you can while you're at the university will kind of help you long term. Participate in informational interviewing, job shadowing. So informational interviewing is definitely something that I meet with students and talk to them about what that entails and the type of questions you want to ask. And it's great networking. It can teach you a whole lot about where you're going and what the industry is looking like. And it gives you some kind of the inside scoop. So yeah, those are some basic strategies that will help you feel a little bit more empowered and a little less stressed, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I really recommend, connecting with the Career Center, because these are strategies and resources that I definitely did not know about when I was in college, and I wish I had. These are, things that once you're out of school are not cheap. They're definitely not free, and it's just sometimes harder to access them. So I would definitely connect with them, and we'll talk in a minute about how to connect with them too. Okay, so I know one of the strategies I mentioned was setting goals. And so we want to talk a little more about how to set specific goals to really help you, increase your use of some of these strategies and, manage your stress more effectively. So goals are really helpful when they are specific, also when they're attainable. I think I'm thinking about SMART goals, which is an acronym for the way to set goals in a more attainable and helpful way. Sometimes we set super lofty goals, but they're very vague, and then we either forget them, or it's hard to know it's hard to measure them. So we want to set more specific goals for stress management. So just a few examples. You can see the list, hopefully, so I won't go through all because I want to leave time for questions. But an example would be I will walk my dog for 20 minutes each morning. And so that is, a goal that is helping you to prioritize self-care, helping you to get some movement, because, with online classes, you might be sitting for most of the day. So having just that designated time, honestly, to make it more specific, you could put from 10 o'clock to 10:20 each morning, something like that. So yeah, the more specific, the better. Another example could be, I will practice mindfulness for 3 minutes each day. And so I know I mentioned mindfulness briefly, and at the end of this presentation, I'll share some mindfulness resources, like if you want to like listen to a recording on mindfulness. There are also a lot of apps that are helpful for practicing mindfulness. But I like this idea of 3 minutes each day because mindfulness is a skill that really needs to be like built. It's almost like a muscle. It has to be really practiced. It doesn't usually come natural for most people, so it does need a lot of repetition. The next one would be, I will challenge myself when I have the thought, I must get this internship or I am a failure. So that thought, you know, it's a very common, understandable thought. I mean, internships are very important for sure, but that adds a lot of pressure. You know, if you're going into an interview with that kind of thought, I mean, it's going to be probably hard to, you know, feel comfortable and relax and be yourself. So trying your best to notice when you have thoughts like that and then challenge the thought, kind of like we talked about earlier with adjusting like our perspective on stress. And again, saying, you know, I'm going to try my best for this internship. This would be a great opportunity. And even just leaving it at that, not really focusing on, but if I don't get it, then what do I do? Just kind of focusing on this would be a great opportunity and I'm going to do my best to get it. We talked about like updating LinkedIn. So this one's about editing your resume for 30 minutes each week, which Alan, you can let me know if that might be too often, maybe like every couple weeks, but just some kind of routine time to check on to make any edits to your resume. And then we'll go to the last one. So I will FaceTime with friends for 30 minutes each night. So if you're, the way you would like to cope with stress is to be more social or to just have like a distraction and get a good laugh, which laughter is a great way to cope with stress, then this kind of stress less goal could be for you, for sure. Just having like set time each night where you will get to FaceTime with either the same friends or like maybe a different friend each day if you would like. Okay. So definitely, either now or when this workshop concludes, I would encourage you to use all the information we've discussed to set your own stress less goal. To set one goal that you have for this semester even. But I try to break it down even to like this month, you could say, of September. One way that you're hoping to really focus on managing stress and coping with stress. Okay. We're getting close to the end. We're just going to share about how to access our services. So definitely, if you have questions, this is a good time to add them to the chat, and we'll get to them in a second. But stress is obviously, it's something very common, and it's something that can be very distressing, to use the word stress again. And so sometimes it is helpful to work with our offices, the Student Counseling Center and the University Career Center, to really get some additional support. So if this workshop was helpful, but you feel like maybe you need a little more support, then you can definitely contact our center. We're open remotely right now. And so I just have info on how you can email our center. You can call, but email is honestly preferred, and you'll get a response within 1 to 2 days that way. And that's just if you're interested in any of our services, which I'll get to in a second. That's how you would contact us. If you're experiencing a crisis or a life-threatening emergency, I would recommend calling 911 for immediate support. If it's a mental health crisis and you would like to speak with a counselor, you can call UTD Talk. It's 972 UTD Talk 24/7. That line is monitored by counselors, and so you can get immediate support that way as well, even when we're closed. And Alan, I'll let you talk about, the next slide talks about how to contact you, but this slide's about your services.
Yes, Stacy. So as far as our services, I kind of spoke about them a little bit before, but plenty of workshops, career expos like we have there, mock interviews, because of course it's oftentimes I'll meet with students to do mock interviews, and sometimes they think they were prepared, and then they get in the mock interview and they realize, oh, maybe I was only prepared in my head, maybe it wasn't reality. So it never hurts to just do that trial run, do the practice. And of course, looking over resumes, resume guidelines, career planning in general, majors, changing majors, looking at that. And of course, now everything's virtual, so virtual workshops and such. But the biggest takeaway with all that is, being able to go into Handshake and schedule an appointment with us. And then whatever it is that you need, we will assist you.
All right. And so, yeah, here's, I'll let you go through this one too.
Okay, yeah, so like I said, we are open remotely now, and we see students every day that way through Teams. If you sign up and you request an appointment with a career consultant through Handshake, then you will be getting a Teams invite that you just simply log on to there. We've also got our Instagram page there at UTD Career Center and our Facebook page. And there's our contact information. So you can also just go to the UTD webpage and look up the Career Center, and you'll find us there. So pretty easy to find. Reach out to us, and we will do our best to help you.
Okay, and then as far as some of the counseling center's resources, they are all on our website, but we are doing a lot of these like 1-hour workshops throughout the semester. The next one's in a couple weeks. We also do some advanced workshops, which are 3-week workshops where you really get to kind of drill into some of this a little deeper, and even leave with like a personalized plan for yourself. So we have one called Anxiety Toolbox that really focuses on, coping with anxiety symptoms. And then we have one called Getting Unstuck, which does focus more on if you're feeling, stuck, unmotivated, or even depressed. So anyway, those are just some of the workshops. We also have groups. We also have individual counseling. We have consultation services, psychiatric services, and it's all done virtually this semester. So you can visit our website, our Instagram page. We have a YouTube page where all of our workshops, just like this one, although honestly, since we had some tech issues, not sure if this one will be up, but I did this workshop also in March, and that one is up on our YouTube page. So if you have a friend who missed this one, or if you want to watch it again, our YouTube page is easy to find if you go to our website. So, and then you can always like us on Facebook as well. Okay, I think we're getting close to that might be the end. Oh, and just some more references and resources. So these are helpful websites if you would like to learn even more about stress. And then these are a few that I would recommend, take maybe a picture of it if you would like, if you want to visit the free meditation website. And meditation is similar to mindfulness. So. All right, I think that's the end of our presentation. So we'll now just double check and see if there are any questions or comments.
I don't see any questions or comments on my end.
Okay, well, thank you all for attending. Thank you for being here. We know this is a very, very stressful year, honestly, but also semester. And so, both of our offices, and the voice you've heard is Bill Ha, who also works in the counseling center. So all of us really want to support you in any way we can. We hope, you got some ideas from this workshop, but you can definitely contact us if you would like, additional support with this. Because this is a tough semester, but we're all in it together, and we want to do what we can to support you. So thank you, and we hope you have a good rest of the week.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Oh, a question just came in. Somebody asked, are the counseling services free for students?
Oh, good question. Yes, all of our services are free for students. So the only time there might be a cost is if you are prescribed any medication. you have to pay for the medication. But to actually do any of our counseling sessions or group sessions or workshops or really anything else, it's all free. It's included in your student services fee, so it's not even like through like health insurance. It's just part of being a UTD student. So. All right, any final questions? We do have a few minutes, so.
Nothing else has come in.
All right, well, you can always email either of our offices if you have other questions. So thanks for being here and have a good rest of the week.